Biomutant is an action-adventure RPG reminiscent of games like Fallout and Skyrim, with an open world that's beautiful but quickly becomes overwhelming in all the worst ways, and a combat system that's fun but gets buried beneath bugs and simplicity. It's currently free for PlayStation Plus right now, so if you were thinking of checking this game out, I suggest you staying to the end of this video. Welcome to Biomutant. To start off, let's talk about Biomutant. Biomutant is a game all about exploring a post-apocalyptic open world filled with monsters and magic. Though the earth was destroyed, a single tree was able to keep nature alive and help the remaining wildlife survive and prosper. Humans have since left Earth, and all that's left are these furry little animals that are ugly as hell and carnivorous meat eaters that are a constant threat to them. You control and create one of these animals and go out on an adventure to save the world from a group of mutant monsters called the World Eaters, who've been eating the World Tree and in doing so threaten all life that remains. All while different tribes fight for territories and to enforce their ideology. So is this a cool concept? Well, yeah. The concept of this game is awesome, but moving past that initial concept, this game falls flat. I love the idea of it, but the execution in the game is severely lacking. Let me explain. Off rip, practically none of the characters talk. The only three that do are the game's narrator and your two consciences. And after the first hour, maybe even the first 10 minutes, it all becomes extremely annoying. None of the voices sound bad, that's not the issue, but the whole game is literally the narrator saying he said this, she said that, and because he always talks in the same tone and accent,
says he's surprised to see anyone this far. As you can see, he didn't plan.
None of the game's characters are memorable due to a lack of personality, not even your own. And because of this, the story falls through. As much as I wanted to follow it and try to learn all about this world and get invested, hearing this narrator just go on and on just killed all interest I had for this world. Yes, there's an option to completely remove the narrator from the game, which is cool, and I appreciate that. But what the hell, none of these characters talk, am I just supposed to play this whole game on mute? I did lower his settings as much as possible to a point where it definitely made the game more enjoyable, but you can't do much for the story mode cutscenes, and I want to hear something when watching them. Which is a shame because with all that being said, this game could have benefited from voice acting greatly. Not every character needed a voice, no, but the main characters and the main villain just had no weight to their actions and dialogue. Nothing felt important because the same British guy has been talking to me for the last 15 hours. Like, could you have imagined if this game had voice acting?
I think it's time for Jack to let her rip.
But ignoring the weird decision to have this game narrated this way, with the threat of the World Eaters, a revenge plot that carried no weight whatsoever because your dead mother was voiced by a British guy, the game's third plot line involved working with one specific tribe of 6 to help conquer and control the other 5, which was fine, I guess. This plot line also fell through, not because of the story itself, but because it just never felt important. Ignoring the voices, the big climactic battles were always the same. The lead up, always the same. The fighting, always the same. Interactions with the tribe's leader was always minuscule and rewards weren't really rewarding. Which I guess balances out because after conquering 2 tribes, the game actually gives you the opportunity to force the remaining tribes to surrender. It's like the developers knew this tribe system wasn't that fun. But with all that story stuff out of the way, how does this game play? After all, I did beat the game and I did spend enough time to platinum it, so I must have enjoyed it at least somewhat, right? Well, with all that being said, I really did enjoy the gameplay. Like, a lot. Like a lot. While the combat itself was flawed, it offered a surprising amount of variety that felt really fun to experiment with and comes few and far in between in a lot of games of the genre. You want to smack enemies around with a giant flying hammer? You can. Want to build a class on some of the goofiest spells in video game history? You can. Want to just spam your gun? You can. My point is that this game allows you to play however you want, and even from the very beginning, go wherever you want. There's a surprising amount of freedom in this little game, and while you continuously explore this world and flesh out the character you want to make, you come across interesting and borderline beautiful biomes that'll have you wanting to search every nook and cranny and even island. And while you're exploring, you can find loot, mainly comprising of armor, consumables, and weapon parts. But the weapon parts themselves being a huge highlight. Handles, sights, you name it. You can essentially create any weapon from scratch, whether melee based or long range, and it's an extremely satisfying system. It's just another way this game allows you to express yourself. Though I wasn't too crazy about their initial gimmicks, I did enjoy the boss fights. It felt like a nice change of pace compared to the rest of the game, especially in their sense of scale. Jumbo Puff being an extreme highlight of the bosses for me, due to Scurry. And even though I hate the narrative choices, this game's sound design is spot on for what it's supposed to be, especially with the music. Roaming the world and just hearing some of the music outside of battle, it's pleasing and reminds me of games like Skyrim. Yeah, the music can get repetitive, but what game doesn't after 25 hours of play? Okay, so now that the positive things are out of the way, I can talk about what really made me want to make this video in the first place. Everything I said before stands. Combat, narrator, locations, love and hate them all the same. But with that being said, man, I hate how buggy this game is. You get your standard bugs like clipping and floating enemies. Enemies comboing you in a way that makes the game not even fun. You know, the usual dumb video game nonsense. But besides that, I came across one of the most annoying bugs I've ever had to deal with in my life. You see, when your character is about to die, you have the option to hit a button to automatically heal yourself. It can either be a consumable or an ability that comes off from your little grasshopper thingy. Well, for some reason, at some point in my playthrough through the game, this button became a gambling mechanic for me. Almost half of the fights I was in, the button would just not work. And because I got soft locked out of healing for that fight, I couldn't even access my consumable wheel, locking me out of my heals for the rest of that fight. With how much I enjoyed this game at times, this almost completely ruined my entire experience from it. And after looking into it, it turns out I wasn't even the only person going through this. This is a known bug. And even ignoring my bug issues with this game has such a crazy amount of negatives. It prided itself on being a post-apocalyptic kung fu fable, and I didn't feel that at all. The kung fu elements never made it past its theme, and with how much it was pushed, was just heavily underutilized. With the game's main super mechanic being a hot mess and visually looking like some lukewarm video game dog water, the kung fu aspects just weren't thought out well enough, making them not interested in the slightest. I went around purposely not using my super. You shouldn't have to do that for any game. And like how I mentioned before with how fun it is to explore, and honestly thank God it is, just because of how this game's mission structure is structured, there's just a bunch of areas that the game brings you to only once. And in one instance, there's a whole region that you wouldn't even go to unless you wanted to. It's not the worst thing in the world, and it's a really minor complaint, but it's still just weird. Which leads into my focal point of this whole video. Biomutant is an amazing concept. I love the idea of this game. And some of its mechanics, though flawed, are fun and enjoyable, but its execution just needed more love and attention. If this studio had a year, hell, even 6 months to flesh out this game further, we could have honestly had something really cool. A game that could have possibly even pushed this genre even further. The foundation is super strong, but weird design choices and buggy systems sell it so short of its full potential. The fact that when first starting the game, it's locked to 30 frames per second on a PS5. I didn't realize I was playing on lower settings until my friend had to message me and tell me. Why is it set to default to play on lower settings? If we ever get a Biomutant 2, I pray that the studio learns from the reception of the first one and takes their time with it. I can't stress it enough. I enjoyed this game enough to beat it and platinumed it. The combat is so fun once you get used to it, and especially once you start making weapons that really fit into, the character you want to make. But if it wasn't free for Plus, and I watched a review similar to mine, I'm not sure I'd pick it up myself. But if this game seems interesting to you, you can get it for free as a PlayStation owner, or try to catch it on sale, as it's pretty much always on sale since release. Either way, enjoy the rest of your day and take care.